Judges ought not to be elected in partisan elections. They're neutrals. They don't represent people. They represent the law. They represent the Constitution in fairly applying the law as written by the legislature. And they're not partisan actors in the process. They are the part of democracy in which they sort of make sure that that the legislature does what they're supposed to do, and that the executive branch does what they're supposed to do. It's part of the separation of powers. And for 20 years or so, we've had nonpartisan elections. In fact, we had public financing of appellate races, and we'd gotten away from this whole concept of partisan politics as applied to judges. Judges are neutral. They have to call the law the way it is, no matter which side wins or which side loses, Democrats or Republicans. And then just recently, the legislature eliminated public funding for nonpartisan appellate races. That we had taken not only the partisan part of electing judges away, but also big money away. And so they eliminated the public funding. And then they thereafter added party labels to candidates running for the Court of Appeals. And so all of a sudden you see partisan elections beginning to raise their appearance in judicial elections. Then they eliminated seats on the Court of Appeals when judges retired, so that a Democratic governor could not replace retiring judges on the Court of Appeals. And then the legislature, basically, in order to try to keep a Supreme Court justice who was a Republican on the Supreme Court to maintain their majority, enacted a law in which they said he could run against himself. They call that a retention election, so that he would not have an opponent. He would run against himself. And that law was declared by the judges unconstitutional. You can't do that. And so recently they have reinstated partisan judicial elections for 2018, but they've eliminated party primaries for those judicial candidates. They've redrawn judicial districts and judicial divisions in a way in which it appears that Republicans are more likely to be elected in some of those districts. They have put incumbent judges in the same districts with each other, requiring them to run against each other, many of which are Democrats. There's even a proposed constitutional amendment to reduce the terms of judges to 2 years and make them run every 2 years, along with every legislator, and spend all their time trying to raise money and running for election as opposed to doing their job, which is a job that is not political. What happens in the courthouse is not political. Trying murder cases and civil cases and those kind of cases, there's nothing political about that at all, but the legislature doesn't seem to understand that. And then most recently they have talked about considering a constitutional amendment to have the legislature pick judges, basically. They want to do away with elections and let they may want to call it merit selection, but it's really legislative selection. So the legislature can pick their judges, and then when the judges interpret the laws that the legislature passes, I suspect that they would hope that those those judges picked by legislators will remember who picked them and who will give deference to the legislature's enactment of laws that are clearly unconstitutional on their face, such as what I talked about earlier, the retention election for the Supreme Court justice, to let him run against himself. I mean, that's just not right. I think judges are facing all sorts of intimidation and threats as a result of, or feel they are anyway, the possibility that their terms will be terminated, that their districts will be redrawn, that their positions will be eliminated, and that their job will be much harder. And it attacks the complete independence of the judiciary in North Carolina.